Okay, we're live.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to our last AP Live session. I'm Mrs. Knight. I am here with Mrs. Velitis, and you may have once or twice seen our behind the scenes producer, Mr. McDonough. So we're doing things, I said it right, right?
You did. Perfect.
Yay! And this is my dog Barley in the background. So we're doing things a little bit differently today. We thought we'd start off with a little Q&A. Mr. McDonough is going to ask us some questions.
Well, thank you, Dawn, and thank you, Emily, for what has been a really exciting couple of months at this point. It's hard to believe that we've got so many sessions under our belts, and now I thought it would be fun to turn the tables and ask you guys some questions. Obviously, the students are all getting ready for the exam. They've got that to look forward to. But now we're going to put you guys on the spot and ask you for some thoughts today. So just from the most basic starting point, how would you guys describe what a rhetorical analysis essay is?
Do you want to start, Emily,
Yeah,
and then I'll take
Sure.
over? Okay.
Sure. I think if you can, this is what I'll say to my students. If you could break it down into its most basic parts, it's looking at what does a writer say, how does a writer say it, and why is it persuasive or effective to that particular audience. That's how I tend to summarize it with my particular students.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Dawn, go ahead. I'm wondering if you can also talk about what do you like about it? So maybe elaborate a little bit on Mrs. Velitis's description of it, and also talk about what you like about rhetorical analysis.
Yeah, I think what Mrs. Velitis just said about looking at the relationships between the writer and the audience is really what I like about it, because I love people watching and psychology and kind of trying to get in people's heads, right? And I think that's what a lot of this is that, the writer understanding their audience well enough to try to convey a message using that knowledge. And I also love that it kind of looks into the hows and whys, which are, I think, two of the most important questions that we should always be asking with anything, any class, anything going on in the world, asking those two important questions. So that's one of the things I really like about it as well.
One of my favorite things about scoring them and reading them is, and I kind of referenced this a little bit yesterday, I like that it's very similar, like that students have the exact same passage, they're looking at it and pulling out the same examples, but then seeing how students take that one example in so many different avenues. I'm kind of a dork, but I find that really exciting when it comes to reading the student essays that I referenced yesterday, that the essay prompt that students saw on Wednesday, a lot of students pull the exact same pieces of evidence. So I love seeing how people can take the same thing in so many different directions, that it's not rote, that it's always, I think, fun to score, to read what students are writing for a rhetorical analysis.
Yeah, you can tell we're English teacher nerds, can't you?
I love it. For full disclosure, both of my parents are former English teachers. They're both now retired. So I'm right there with you out on all this stuff. And actually it brings me to kind of a related issue, which is beyond the exam and beyond AP English language class. What do you think some of the skills that students gain from the work that they're doing to prepare for the exam, but how does that transcend what they're going to do on exam day? What are some of the ways in which they'll carry it with them beyond the classroom? And so Mrs. Velitis, maybe you can start, and then Mrs. Knight can add some thoughts.
I've actually gotten a few emails from students that are really kind and sweet, and they say things like, I always hated AP English, or I've never been an English person. I've always loved STEM. And I respond with, but try to see AP English language as a very logically minded type of an English. And I'll joke that I'm a dinosaur, but when I was in high school, my high school didn't have language. We only had AP literature, and that I didn't even take the exam because I am certainly not a STEM person by any means, but that I for the SAT, for my GRE, I always scored higher in the math and science sections than I did with the verbal and looking at the English passages. I think it's because I see AP English language as being so logically minded of, I know that if the writer does this, this is how it typically functions. So how do I find that within this particular passage? That to me, it's very, very linear when it comes to like, how do you approach reading and the task itself? So I'll joke with my students that AP English language is like the business version of English, or it's for pre-law majors, that it's not necessarily, and of course I have students who become English majors and I love them and force them to dedicate their first book to me. But that AP English literature is really a course, an English course based for lit majors. But I think that language really transcends into everything they do, even from something as simple as which outfit they pick out in the morning. It's all about rhetoric. It's all about what kind of argument you're putting out there. So I actually find it to be the most accessible AP English class because it is so logically minded.
Mhm.
That's great. Yeah, that's really an interesting take where students often kind of pigeonhole themselves as well. I'm a STEM person,
Mm-hmm.
and so therefore I never wanted, but I think kind of seeing that applicability and Mrs. Knight, I'm sorry, what were you gonna
No,
chime in with?
I echo the same sentiments, but also, the idea of just having to delve deeper. I think a lot of this class is about challenging yourself to think in more depth. Again, that how and why. It's not just, identifying that a writer used rhetoric, but how they used it, why they used it, whether it was effective. And I think those are skills that we take into any profession. We always have to think in more depth. We're always trying to convey some argument to someone, whether it's that we want to raise or that they should use our company or our services. So I think there are so many ways that this class translates outside of high school.
And that's all well and good, but now for my next question, it's exam day, and I sit down, I get my email from the College Board, and I log in, and oh my gosh, there is a passage that just freaks me out. It doesn't look like anything that I've practiced or whatever the case may be. What advice would you give, or Mrs. Velitis, you talked about that kind of linear AP English language as this linear course. So what might you remind the student, hey, you know how to do this, kind of walk through, keep these steps in mind, or something along those lines. And Mrs. Knight, I'll start with you in terms of what that checklist might look like for you that you want students to be reminded of in their head.
Yeah, I think first of all is just to kind of take it one step at a time and not be overwhelmed. So, the first thing, kind of going through that checklist, we've been talking to them about, just take the time to think about what is the prompt asking you to do, because ultimately you need to answer the prompt. I kept telling mine AP means answer the prompt. So, what is the prompt asking you to do? That's what you want to answer. And so, we know it's going to be rhetorical choices. And then the second piece to that is what is the message they're conveying? So then when we read the passage, we're looking for those things, what rhetorical choices are standing out and what is the message that's standing out. And looking for those things kind of as you just take those checklists piece by piece. Once you have that, it's pretty easy to put together using those, pieces that we talked about in early lessons. I noticed that, that they were using a lot of comparison or a shift in tone or allusions. So those are the things I'm going to base my body paragraphs around. And you already have analyzed and annotated for those things, and now you just plug them in. It is very formulaic when you go through those steps that we talked about. So first of all, what's the prompt asking? Secondly, just looking for patterns, and then put it together in that format we talked about, and you're okay. Take a deep breath. You'll be fine.
Yeah, I would agree. I think I would echo, to me, I think that the prompt is like a spark note. So if you read the passage and you're like, I don't understand anything this person is saying, don't give up, don't panic. I would go back to the prompt, because I feel like the prompt usually gives you so much insight if you just take a little bit more time to kind of break it down. And then the other big thing that I would always go back to, and again, I've referenced more in the last week or so of our sessions, is just focus on the rhetorical situation. Identify who is the speaker writing to or speaking to, what's happening, or can you tell what's happening? What is the need for this person to write? Because I think that some of my students who get very panicked, and when they're in my classroom with me and they're working on a timed writing and they're overwhelmed, they'll come up to me and just panic or freak out. And I'll say, just slow down, go back to the prompt and think about that rhetorical situation. And typically, if you can figure out at least the bare minimum with the rhetorical situation, you can at least start writing. And then I find that with the rhetorical analysis compared to the other prompts, you can really write yourself into a pretty good essay if you have just those few basic pieces. My students just had an assignment this week where I made them take photos of their annotations and send them to me so I could give them feedback of like, if you're not annotating a prompt, like, what are you going to do? And a lot of them, I just kept writing back, I'm so glad that you didn't necessarily like list out your thesis or your choices. You started with the rhetorical situation. You started, we talk about space cap. I'm like, you started with the space. And I think that that's, if you can't write and you don't understand the passage, try to understand just those basic pieces.
Yeah, that's great advice. And hopefully everybody gets, on exam day gets a passage that they're, oh man, I'm so excited.
I'm ready for this.
Wonderful. This is wonderful.
Yeah.
I could think of nothing better, which brings me to my next question, which is,
what is the prompt going to be? I wish I knew, Mr. McDonough.
Yeah, I will be arrested and thrown in jail. Well, A, I don't even know, but B, if I were to, I would obviously be immediately put in jail.
Ousted.
Yes. I see Barley back there. It looks very sleepy, so I'm going to need to spice it up for him.
Oh, there you go.
Here he comes.
Man, what?
Ask and you shall receive.
We did that on purpose.
Yeah, great work.
Well-trained dog.
Unbelievable. So that issue of the prompt and revisiting the prompt. So let's revisit some favorite prompts. What are, in practice exams or released exams that are available on AP Central? Any favorites that stand out to you guys from over the years? And Mrs. Knight's got one on the tip of her tongue.
I do. I love Mary Oliver's Owls.
Oh.
And I think because I love the contrast in it. I love using it with my students too, because as the English teacher and the literature piece of that, plus the connection to nature. There's so much about that piece that I love. So I think that's probably my favorite passage. The idea of the antithesis with the beauty and terror of nature, and that, sometimes the flowers are terrifying. I just, everything about it. I also love Mary Oliver. So anyway.
And you love nature and being outside.
I love nature,
yeah.
all of it. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Mine should be predictable for anyone who watched my session on syntax and my love of syntax. It's a terrible prompt for students. It's a terrible prompt for teachers because students are so overwhelmed by it. But I love the, I want to say it was 2006, the William Hazlitt piece on the want of money. That was the 3-sentence long passage. So it was like 2 full columns and only 3 sentences. I love that one, but maybe it's also just because I love looking at syntactical structures. Wild and crazy Friday, I know.
Barley is leaving now.
Yeah, that's exactly how.
Get out the door.
Yes,
that's exactly. That's what my students say too. No, I know it's a really tough one. So I don't think I've ever given it as a timed writing for my students, but I think that it just brings up some really good discussion about structure and organization. and that again, I'm kind of a dork, but the like symbolic function of a sentence and like what is its purpose. So that one always I kind of geek out about, mostly in the form of like an out of class essay or a discussion. I also love that it's so rich that you get, again, so many interpretations from students because it's such a dense passage. I hope we do not have a 3-sentence passage on May 20th, though, for the record. I love syntax, but not enough for that to happen.
We may have to do a, like a regroup, after as a team and discuss for the students.
I would love that.
So yeah, those are some good choices. Students, you're welcome to go track those down on AP Central and check them out. So you guys obviously have spent the last several weeks going back to March, running sessions, essentially every day. And when you weren't running the session, you were preparing for your future sessions. So now that's here we are, the last one. Any that stand out to you? I know you watch each other's sessions. Any that, as we're getting down to it, that you think are worth revisiting for students, just as a good, hey, maybe in the last couple of days here, this would be a good refresher, something just good to keep top of mind. So any of those lessons that stand out. And let me start with who looks more ready?
Eeny, meeny, miny, mo.
Yeah, raise your hand. I'll call on someone. Mrs. Velitis, I'm going to start with you.
Okay. I'll recommend one of mine and one of Mrs. Knight's that I've actually referenced to 2 students this week. I thought that Mrs. Knight's session on irony was a really good session because I think that it broke down something that seems very enigmatic to students, that they don't know. When a teacher says, oh, this is an example of irony, they're like, oh, yes, I get that. But I think that a lot of students have a hard time recognizing irony. And so I have 2 students this week who are pretty strong students, and I think that they might recognize some of those nuances, that they had some help. So I think that that's a really good one. And I forget the exact date of that one, but I do think that was recent. That was a pretty good one. And then I've been sending my students back to the very first one about how do you attack this prompt. That's one that I think is just a really good overview of what the rhetorical analysis essay is and how do you approach it. So I've referred my students to those 2 just this week alone.
All right. Two excellent choices, I must say. Mrs. Knight, how about you?
You did not say that the syntax lesson was excellent, Mr. McDonough. Come on.
So I've also been sending mine back. I had my own students watch our first 5 because I like that it broke down one prompt over the course of those 5 lessons and got in some depth. And I think that if you have time to watch those first 5 and to really get into the depth of just one rhetorical analysis, I think that's a good way to do it. But also I think you did one when we first got into the review lessons that was just breaking down the rhetorical analysis passage. And I think that would be another good one for students to go back to. And then obviously doing the practice exams from this week.
Yeah. And for the record, I don't have a date. I was trying to find that irony lesson, but just go to the playlist, scroll through. You'll never know what other wonderful lessons.
So many treasures in there.
So many gems. Yes, exactly. I have to say, I enjoyed all the lessons equally. Just like when my children ask me, who's your favorite child? I say, I love you all equally. So I'm not gonna pick any favorites. Watch all of them, kids. If you can binge,
oh gosh,
Outer Banks on Netflix, you can binge the
or Tiger King.
You can binge all of the AP English language.
I do regret that we did not have time to put a blooper reel together for you guys. I think that would have been fabulous. I'm sorry we did not have that time.
Mrs. Knight, that would haunt me.
I know it would have been enjoyable for the students, though.
What do you mean? Every single lesson
there were no bloopers.
Smoothly, perfectly. Let's see. I know that something that has, is kind of always a challenge, I think, for anyone when you're sitting down to take an exam, that's high stakes and that you've been preparing for. And with a course like AP English language, it's not really something that you can cram. You've been kind of developing these skills over a long period of time. So in some ways it can almost feel overwhelming because you have, all of this experience and all this information. So how might you guys kind of help simplify and just kind of, hey, here's a few tips, a few things to keep in mind. And Mrs. Knight, I'll start with you for this one.
Well, I mean, I want to go back to that kind of, I call it the steps, or kind of the checklist of things that you want to do. And it gets back to that. What is the prompt asking? Emily, I love that idea that the prompt is basically like a spark note. That's so true. I think you just need to take the time to really think about what it's asking you to do. And then, we've been through those important things that, looking at speaker, audience, purpose, and understanding the relationships among those things. And we talked about several different ways to think about that. But that idea of, what is the interaction among those three things? What is the message that they're conveying, and then how do they do it? And once you do that and you organize your body paragraphs around showing that and proving that, you're okay. So I just think that going back to that checklist of, taking the time, like you said, to annotate, definitely annotate. I look for patterns, and then how it are, those choices being made in order to convey to a specific audience that they know something about. How will that impact that audience, and why?
I, again, totally echo. I think that's the crux of this whole prompt, is just, this whole task is just speaker, audience, and a specific audience. It's not generic, but so I totally agree. I think that I referenced this yesterday in my session, but I've gotten some emails from students or from teachers panicked about a thesis statement, or what if my introduction isn't great? What if my introduction doesn't have the best hook ever? And I think the biggest thing I would just keep stressing to students is just get something on the paper for your introduction and really work on the body paragraphs. That's their big ticket item. 4 of the 6 points come just from the body paragraph section. So kind of echoing Mrs. Knight, I think showing your knowledge in the body paragraph is so much more important than, do I have a great hook? And so if students are kind of pausing in the beginning with, or at the end with, oh my gosh, I need to have a lasting impression of my conclusion. Yeah, you do. Like, I would love that, but I would rather you spend more time on your body paragraphs. And then the other thing that's not really an academic skill, I think that you're right, Mr. McDonough, that this class is tough because those skills are recursive. You can't cram the night before like you could for another course. But I would also just, for students who are anxious or trying to prepare, to just like calm down and just reference or recognize that you've been reading your whole life. And that's all that this really is just reading a passage, and that they do have the skills and they are prepared and they are ready. And that try not to overthink it and overcomplicate it and make it harder on yourself, that you've got this. It's just reading a passage and talking about the passage itself, which I think everyone can do.
Yeah, Mrs. Knight, any thoughts? Because something that Mrs. Velitis just brought up that I think is really important to hear from you guys on. What advice would you want to give to a student who, starts to get a little anxious? That timer pops up on the screen and it's like, oh my gosh, this is happening. And what would you want to remind them of?
Yeah, I think that's why I wore my Radiate Positivity sweatshirt today. I think it's really important to, have that mindset of it's going to be okay. When you spend a lot of time, I know it's hard to calm anxiety, especially in that timed situation. But if you just take that time to just go back to the prompt, like we talked about, what is it asking? It's something that you can answer the prompt. You can find patterns. It's very manageable and very doable. I think the other thing is familiarity. So, doing the practice exams this week and going through the reviews for those and having your checklist ready so that, you have what you need in front of you at the time that you're starting the exam. There's a checklist we're going to talk about later, and I think we've talked about before in some of our other sessions that College Board put together. And I think if you go into it with your space ready,
Mhm.
and you have your document that you're going to be putting your initials and your AP number on, and that's ready. You have the website ready that you're going to go to. You know what it's going to look like because you've done the practice exams. You've been through some of these. I think that comfort level with none of this is new. I'm familiar with what's going to happen. I'm ready for that. I think that helps a lot. But
Mhm.
even then, when that starts, the timer starts, just be kind to yourself. Take a deep breath. You know what you need to do and you can do it.
Mhm.
That's great advice. And I know that for many of the students watching right now, they've got a lot going on. There's a lot of uncertainty in the world. And I think for all of you guys listening, picture Mrs. Velitis cheering you on. Picture Mrs. Knight with the radiate positivity shirt cheering you on. Your teacher at your school cheering you on. There's a lot of people who want you to do well, who want you to succeed, who believe in you, and know that you can do a tremendous job. So yeah,
Yeah.
thank you both for that. And kind of speaking of that, uncertainty and kind of how different things are in the world right now for so many folks. What's been different about this experience for you guys as teachers, being pressed into service as master class? I've all throughout the quarantine, I've been getting master class ads on Instagram, and you guys are the master class of AP English language. So Mrs. Velitis, could you share some thoughts on what this experience has been like for you?
It's been tough. So I think I've been teaching AP Lang for about 15 years. And between this and then doing some consulting work, I've probably taught thousands and thousands of students. This is probably the toughest thing I've done. And I think it's primarily because as teachers, we went into the profession because most of us, because we love students and we love being around them. We love sharing our knowledge of what we're studying with students.
Mhm.
And it's very bizarre just talking to your computer screen for 30, 35 minutes and not getting any kind of where that then I need to pause and restate it, or where you get questions from students. So I think the lack of a two-way street has been really tough. And then as a teacher trying to lead these sessions, thinking, what might they struggle with and how can I kind of structure my lesson to address those concerns when I think they might have them, but then also not knowing who's watching and what their needs or their abilities are, because that's been a struggle in itself too, of how much do I share? Is this going to be overload? Like sometimes when people give directions and they're like, go past the hydrant and then go left at the second stop sign, and then you'll pass a purple house, and then you're going to take a right down the alley. Then I'm like, sometimes it's tough to know, am I giving too many directions when I don't have that questioning or that nonverbal feedback? And again, trying to kind of anticipate what students need without knowing the students and what they need has been tough.
Yeah.
Worth it, but tough.
Mhm.
Yeah. Mrs. Knight, how about you? What has been interesting or challenging or different about this experience?
Yeah, I think, I miss my students a lot. And I think one of the great things about this was that opportunity to still feel like I was having, some FaceTime sort of interaction with students and I guess when you're a teacher, all students are your students. all kids are your kids. My husband's always like, your kids are our kids, you know, because the students are our kids. And that means all of you. So I miss the energy and the interaction at school. It's definitely very tough to teach a lesson when you don't see the feedback. I mean, I read the room all the time, I'll stop myself mid-sentence and go, I see I've lost you. We need to back, you know,
Let's
and
try
you
it
have
again.
no idea if that's happening. You're just going through on Zoom and hoping that it makes sense, or that somebody will just pause and I'll just go back and see what she said again. It's a very difficult. Plus, I had never Zoomed until this started, so just the technical aspects of it, and it's tough. It is, and I know that we're all kind of trying to make it through this whole thing, and we will, because we're all working together, and But I know that there are a lot of people dealing with a lot of very tough situations, and I guess one of the good things about that or about this is just that you can see that there are a lot of people who you've never met before who care a lot about you too.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's very well said. And I'm having a hard time because I feel like we're getting down to kind of wrapping things up, and I would be remiss if I did not take a few moments here during Teacher Appreciation Week to thank a lot of the English teachers in my life. I mentioned both my parents are English teachers, and I've two brothers who are teachers. I have a sister-in-law who's a teacher. It runs in the family. I I didn't fall too far from the tree, since this is what I'm doing. But I wanted to just give a quick shout out to my daughter Allison is in AP English Language. She is somewhere right now, completely embarrassed that I have mentioned her, but a shout out to the Heightstown High School and Mrs. Aziz, who's a wonderful AP English teacher. And a quick shout out to some folks who got me into the AP English community going back a few years. Renee Shea, Larry Scanlon, Robin Offsis, John Williamson,
Those
Elizabeth
are like
Duffy.
AP Lang celebrities to me. I'm like,
Yes,
ooh.
I know. Whoa.
Some just wonderful and generous teachers, and I have to say that Dawn and Emily, you guys, it has been such a pleasure, and as the parent of a child who is watching the lessons that you guys are making, I've had the good fortune to do a lot of cool different projects in my career, but doing this and the stakes that we're kind of dealing with, where there's kids who maybe for whatever reason their school is trying to figure out remote learning, and it's hard, and you guys are providing daily instruction to thousands of students all across the country. So a huge thank you from the bottom of my heart to you guys for the work that you've done, and for you students listening. Make sure you're reaching out to your teachers, but also make sure if somewhere along the line you're gonna maybe in an airport someday when the world returns to normal, you're gonna bump into Mrs. Velitis, Mrs. Knight, and be like, I watched your videos on YouTube. So yeah, just a huge thank you to you guys, and let me turn it over to you guys to offer any shout outs to.
Yeah, that's a perfect segue. Speaking of Teacher Appreciation Week, thank you, Mr. McDonough. That was very, there we go. That was very kind and sweet of you. Again, I think as teachers, especially English teachers, we value words. My husband makes fun of me because I'm always like, words are important, but words are important. And it's really, really nice to feel recognized and appreciated. So this is Teacher Appreciation Week, and I go back. One of the things that Mrs. Knight and I would encourage you guys to do is maybe just send an email to a teacher, hopefully an English teacher, but to a teacher, just thanking them for helping you in some capacity, whether it's academic or personal. I think is a really nice gesture, and that goes a long way with teachers. And I do want to give just a really quick shout out. I received an email from a student last night at West Hill High School, asking if we could give some special attention to a teacher named Mrs. Frisch. And this is a reference to the timed writing prompt that you guys saw on Wednesday, where Marian Evan Lubes references how, I was so deeply touched that I felt compelled to respond. And I felt the same way. I got an email from a student just describing how wonderful Mrs. Frisch has been for him and his classmates, how kind and compassionate and helpful and selfless, really, she's been all year, but especially during the pandemic, and that she just has really put her students' personal and academic needs over her own. So Mrs. Frisch, if you're watching, your students love you, and they think that you're doing just a fantastic job, and they're so lucky to have you as a teacher and a role model. All right, a few last minute tips, unless Mr. McDonough or Mrs. Knight, you've got anything else to add?
No, I would like to say thanks to Dan as well, and echo our appreciation for all of the teachers out there who are doing some, different kind of teaching right now. And we appreciate all of you too.
We're trying our best.
We sure are.
We're all trying our best. All right, so for those students, just a few last minute logistics to go over. Remember that for the AP English language essay, you have 3 options for how to write your essay. One is to have 2 windows open, one that's got the prompt and the timer, and then one that has a Google Doc, Microsoft Word, or Note application. Make sure you start with your AP ID initials, or your AP ID at the top, your initials underneath. And then what you can do is just copy that and paste it back into the space provided in the platform. Or you can, again, have your 2 windows, and one is with a Google Doc, Microsoft Word, document, or notes, where you're typing it, you are saving your document as a doc, docx, a txt, or an odt, whatever that is, again, with your AP ID and your initials, and then you will attach the document to the browser and click submit. And then the third and final option is to handwrite your essay, take photos of it, and then you will upload them into the system. And I do want to just do a quick reminder that if you are thinking that you will handwrite your essay, make sure you are opening your e-ticket on a smartphone or a tablet. That way it's easy for you to open it and then take a photo and then upload from there. So just a quick reminder with that. And that, again, your AP ID and your initials at the top. If you don't know your AP ID, you can find that in AP Classroom. When you go to submit, there is a 2-step process that you'll attach or paste, and then you're going to have to click submit. If you do not hit submit before your timer runs out, your response will not count. So once you select submit, you might see that there's some transfer time depending on your bandwidth and where you are. Just leave that window open, leave your computer plugged in, don't close out until you get a message that confirms your AP exam is complete. And if you don't ever see that message, then just make sure you are going to cb.org/request makeup to explain what happened, and then request an e-ticket for the June makeup date. But the most important thing there is when you hit submit, leave that window open until you get the confirmation message.
Okay, so we also have some 5 easy steps for you to get ready for the exam. Remember when I said some of relieving that anxiety is just the comfort level with knowing what to expect, with what's going to happen? Doing these 5 steps should alleviate some of that test anxiety that day and make you a little more comfortable. So first of all is trying the exam demo, and we're going to share the slide with the links in a minute. So definitely do the exam demo. You're going to basically go through the steps Mrs. Velitis just talked about so that you can see how that works. That way, as you're taking the exam, you can focus on taking the exam and not worry about, oh my gosh, how do I submit this? How is this going to work? There's also the checklist that I mentioned earlier, again, when I was talking about anxiety. So go through that checklist, have it ready, have all the pieces, of that checklist ready, and you'll be good to go. It asks you to confirm your email address in My AP, and that's just to make sure that you can get to your exam ticket. You can also get to that in your AP classroom on My AP, but confirming your email address, it's in your profile, just ensures that you get information that you need. Locate your e-ticket, whether it's in your email or on My AP, and then be ready to check in 30 minutes early. And I know that seems like a lot. We check in 30 minutes early to this Zoom every time, just because we want to be prepared and ready. So that's the point there. That way, you know that it's working, that you have plenty of time to troubleshoot if it's not, and to make sure that you have everything you need. Okay, next. And then the important links we talked about, you can go to myap.collegeboard.org. That's where you'll find, you'll be able to get into My AP Classroom and get to your e-ticket there. You'll be able to go to your profile there and check your email. We also have the demo site. There's a star next to that one for a reason. You should definitely do that if you haven't already. And then again, if you look at the fourth one, we have the checklist. That's really important. But again, take the time to go through each of these. You don't have to do them all in one day. Some of them at the end, like 9 and 10, may not apply to you. They just give you some good information so that you have that level of comfort when you go, when you get to exam day. All right.
Well, I can't believe that after many, many sessions and a lot of hours of preparation on your part. I just showed up a half an hour early most of the time.
You were there for moral support. We needed you, Mr. McDonough.
Yes, we did.
Well, that is nice of you to say, but you did, perfect without me. It's been a true privilege to work with educators who are as caring, as thoughtful, as dedicated as you guys are. So I am trying to establish a tone of reverence and appreciation.
And your purpose is?
My message that you guys are the best, and the students who have had the opportunity to watch these videos are lucky to have had such wonderful teachers in addition to their regular AP English language classroom teachers, but to have the two of you adding to it it's almost unfair how lucky they are to receive that. So okay. I can't thank you guys enough for all that you've done, and we'll look forward to connecting with you guys again when all of this is over. Let me let you guys say some parting words as I get this screen ready to share in the background here.
Yeah, Mrs. Knight, do you want to go first?
Sure. Hey, we just want to tell you guys how much we care about you. Please, take care of yourselves first and foremost. We know there's a lot going on. Just do your best. And like I said, be kind to yourself. Be ready, do your best on the exam, and then know that whatever you did is okay.
Yeah, you guys have got this. Just read slowly and carefully and trust yourselves. You've been reading for many, many years. Just trust yourselves. Do the best you can do. And that you're a better student, you're a better reader and a better writer and a better thinker just because of all the great work your teachers have done all year long. So you're ready, you're prepared, you got this.
Is the audio going?
It is.
Oh,
yeah.
Then I shouldn't have stopped it. Well, signing off. Here you go, students. Enjoy. Good luck. Thank you again to Mrs. Knight and Mrs. Velitis for being the absolute best.
Bye, guys.
We are live.
So we're going to walk you through everything you need to know, and you're going to have it. And so, may the 4th be with you.
Continuiamo anche il nostro giro per l'Italia.
You Are a Local Lunatic shared this via Twitter. I'm really, really grateful for @JacobsPhysics and @Mr. JB Physics and just @College Board in general for doing so much for these AP exam reviews. I actually get stuff a lot more than I did before COVID happened, and I'm just really, really grateful for that. Smiley face.
All right, so we're talking about the overall big picture of period 4. Here are some things I just want you guys to remember.
KOA shared on TikTok, AP English Zoom streams are my only social interaction right now. Hashtag FYP, hashtag isolation, hashtag AP English.
They would send large ships of laborers just to collect the guano and get on the ship. Is collect the right word? Do you mine guano? Do you excavate it? I don't know what the verb is there. I'm supposed to be using.
We're going to be focusing on tone. Specifically, how do you read and interpret tone?
Karen Tabola Moore on Facebook shared, my students have enjoyed the AP Latin videos with Jeannie Luangu. Since I can only give a live Zoom class twice a week, this has been a great support.
Or I could say I want my lawyer and they have to get me my representation. But, and here's our but for today, that is going to sacrifice the abilities of the community.
Am I sharing the slideshow right now, by the way?
Nope. If you are, I can't see it.
Utkarsh Kali shared on Twitter, thank you for the helpful AP classes on YouTube. My preparation for AP Calc VC has become so much easier and efficient.
So I drew this like 4 o'clock this morning. So it's not beautiful, but I think it gets the point.
You turn over another card and they get compared and that person would win. Tell me if you do it differently, Mr. Schultz.
Nope.
The more that you can find that connection within yourself, within the character, I feel like you write the character with a lot more depth.
Learning about the economy is important, and I wish more people did what you're doing.
My advice to all the students out there, whatever it is you choose to go into, make sure that it's a passion that burns in your belly.
I learned so much working in local government about public service. It teaches you that it's 24/7 and that you have to learn to listen.
I am someone who believes in following your passion, right? And working hard. And if you kind of find that there's something out there that you think is a need in the market and no one else is making it, then maybe you have to be a little bit creative.
11th grade US history is the reason we're talking, because I don't think I would have picked up Ron Chernow's biography of Alexander Hamilton if I hadn't written a paper on Alexander Hamilton in high school.
Asia K3 shared on Instagram, I'm so glad he came. He's the reason I was able to get more interested in U.S. history, and I always listen to the Hamilton soundtrack when studying for English. Emoji.
We have a message here from Girleen from Instagram. She says, definitely worth waking up before noon.
And so you just connect your battery to your magnet like this, and then you get copper. Ta-da!
Look at that. That's amazing.
When are we ever going to need calculus? You'd be surprised. I mean, you might make videos and then calculate like the breaking pressure of Thanos' abdomen if Ant-Man were inside it.
This one hit close to home. This is very special for me. Mr. Walters teaches in Managua, Nicaragua, and that's where I was born. And I want to say hello to all the students out there.
Lyra Matt tweeted, I watch every AP Lit video. They're so helpful, especially for students whose first language is not English. Ms. Barber and Mr. Carlos' enthusiasm and passion inspired and encouraged me not to give up.
Mire, Julia de Burgos nace, es todo un mito en la littérature caribeña.
Pour souligner encore ce qu'on essaie de faire, on veut expliquer des idées et des opinions.
Mrs. Lowe shared on Twitter, these videos are excellent. They do a great job of reviewing mixed material with an awesome job of presenting new material.
好，下面是 cultural presentation。抱歉让大家坐着哈，但是这个很重要。
今日も一緒に日本語頑張って勉強しましょうよ。はい、それで。
Chanel Kernander said on Twitter, love Mr. Escobar and Miss Barber's videos for my AP Lit students. You two are awesome. Tuning in live from Houston, Texas.
What'd you say for Dabo? Did you answer what that means?
Yeah, future. I will give.
Just as Gandalf parted ways with the hobbits before they undertook the scouring of the Shire, the time is almost here for Josh and me to sail into the West.
Thanks for showing up every day and reviewing the course with us. And remember, on the exam, sound like you've taken the course. Be specific and be scientific.
It's been a blast working with you all spring. And like I said, this chapter of your life isn't over.
You now have a chance to rewrite.
Thank you so much for watching Mark and me for these last 30, I don't know, however many sessions we had. And if it weren't for you, we wouldn't have had these sessions.
Well, thanks for watching. And one final piece of advice. If the question seems really complicated, it's probably not.
Gracias por haberme acompañado durante estas semanas.
I just want to say thank you to all the amazing AP Statistics students out there that have been following along with us for the past 6 weeks.
Thank you so much for watching. We really appreciate it and hope these videos have helped.
Hearing from you and seeing the pictures that you've sent us of your pets, thank you so much for tuning in.
Thank you to everyone for watching, for tuning in, for continuing your educations. Best of luck on your exams.
You've prepared, you're ready, do your best on this exam, and then congratulate yourself no matter what you get.
Optimum Fortunam Omnibus. Best of luck to everyone.
Thank you for tuning in to all of our AP Bio review lessons and our practice exam.
Bon courage, as we say en français.
Thank you so much for tuning in. Luke and I really had a super fun time, and we hope you learned a lot.
Thank you to all of the AP Chemistry students who watched the videos.
You're good enough, you're smart enough, and gosh darn it, people like you.
Thanks for tuning into all these videos. Music theory friends, don't forget to resolve your tendency tones.
You guys have got this. Remember, you are the solution.
Thank you so much for joining me the past month and a half. It's been such a journey and such a treat for me.
Hey, thanks for watching the last 6 weeks, especially the calculus crew.
You guys are awesome. You are excellent. You are brilliant. I really, really enjoyed our time together, and I know you guys are going to rock that exam next week.
Just remember that you have worked your butts off this year. Y'all are going to do great.
It is time for you to shine.
Type your response, copy it, paste it in the submission box. Good luck.
Hey, arigato. Benkyou ganbatte kudasai. Remember to practice on the app that comes out next week.
Y'all are going to do great. And remember, geography is everywhere.